The classroom was filled with strange beings from across the galaxy. Professor Kethver stood at the front of the room, his crystal body catching the light from the overhead panels. His voice carried no emotion as he spoke to the 47 students sitting before him. "Today we discuss your final test," the professor said. "You will be sent to Nightmare Crucible. This is a Class 12 death world. You must survive for 72 hours. The room went quiet. A few students shifted in their seats. The tall reptilian saurians, known for being tough warriors, looked worried. The insect-like Chitauri clicked their sharp teeth together. The glowing lumens flickered like dying light bulbs. "You will have basic environment suits and emergency beacons," Professor Kethver continued. "Nothing else. The planet will test everything you have learned." A Chitarian student raised one of her forearms. "Professor, what is the survival rate for this test?" 40% pass. 20% need emergency rescue. The rest. He did not finish the sentence. In the back row, 3 humans sat together. Marcus was a tall man with short brown hair. He looked calm as he listened. Beth had red hair tied back and was drawing something in her notebook. Tom was older with gray hair and seemed to be thinking about something else entirely. The humans will receive the standard safety briefing for Deathworld species, Professor Kethver added. This was meant to make the other students feel better. Most alien species thought humans needed special protection because Earth was considered a dangerous world. Marcus raised his hand. "Professor, what makes this planet so deadly?" The question surprised everyone. A Lumen student actually stopped glowing for a moment. The Chitauri translator devices made confused beeping sounds. "The planet has extreme environments that change." Without warning, Professor Kethver explained. Volcanic regions next to frozen wastelands. Acid swamps that border gravity wells. Radiation storms and predators that can dissolve metal with their bite. Marcus nodded like the professor had just described a nice park. "Sounds interesting." Beth looked up from her drawing. "Is there weather? Like storms and stuff?" "Constant electromagnetic storms. Temperature swings of over 200 degrees. Toxic atmosphere in some regions." "Cool," Beth said and went back to her drawing. Tom finally spoke up. "Any water sources?" "Acid pools and contaminated ice. All require purification to avoid death." "Got it," Tom said and made a note. The other students stared at the humans. A Saurian warrior named Vorthak leaned forward. "Do you 3 understand what he just described?" "This planet kills trained soldiers," Marcus shrugged. "We heard him. Sounds like camping, but with more variety." Professor Kethver's crystal form flickered. Slightly. In his 300 years of teaching, no species had ever described a Class 12 death world as camping. "Perhaps you did not understand. The gravity changes randomly. The air can burn your lungs. The ground itself tries to kill you." "Yeah," Beth said. "Tom, remember that trip to Death Valley when the car broke down?" "Which time?" Tom asked. "The one with the flash flood or the one with the rattlesnakes?" "Both, I think," Marcus laughed. "Good times." The professor decided to move on. "You will be dropped at random locations across the continent. You must find ways to get food, water, and shelter. The weather will try to kill you every day. The animals will try to eat you every night." A nautiloid student who looked like a giant squid raised a tentacle. "How do we know what is safe to eat?" "You test carefully, make small portions, watch for reactions." The 3 humans looked at each other. "Trial and error," Marcus said. "Classic. But some foods will kill you instantly," the professor warned. "Then you test really small portions," Beth said. Professor Kethver realized these humans were serious. They actually seemed excited about the challenge. He had seen this before with warrior species, but humans were supposed to be the careful ones. They wore protective gear for everything on their homeworld. "There will be no rescue for 72 hours unless you activate your emergency beacon," he continued. "Once you use the beacon, you fail the course." "What if we lose the beacon?" Tom asked. "Then you must survive until the pickup time." "Fair enough." A Chitarian student was shaking. Professor, my people cannot handle temperature changes over 50 degrees. How can we survive this? You must adapt, use your technology. Work together, think creatively, Marcus whispered to his friends. 50 degrees? That is like changing seasons. Maybe they mean Celsius, Beth whispered back. Still not that bad, Tom added. The professor heard them. The temperature swings are in Celsius, from -80 to +120. Oh, Marcus said, that is more interesting. The other students looked at him like he was insane. Even the Saurians, who prided themselves on being tough, seemed worried about those numbers. Professor Kethver finished his briefing with safety protocols. He explained how the emergency beacons worked. He showed them the basic environment suits. He talked about the pickup locations. The three humans asked practical questions. How much did the suits weigh? Could they be modified? What tools were built in? They wanted to know about local star charts and seasonal patterns. The other students asked different questions. How fast could rescue ships reach them? What were the medical facilities like? Could they bring extra food? When class ended, the other students left quickly. They needed time to prepare mentally. Some would spend the next week in meditation. Others would fast to prepare their bodies. The humans stayed behind to talk to Professor Kethver. This planet, Marcus said, it has multiple biomes close together? Yes, within a few kilometers you might find desert, Arctic, and volcanic regions. That is really unusual, Beth said. What causes that kind of environmental variation? The professor explained about the planet's unstable core and weird magnetic field. The humans listened carefully and asked more technical questions. They seemed genuinely curious about the science behind the danger. Professor, Tom said finally, this sounds like a really interesting place to study. Thank you for choosing it. After the humans left, Professor Kethver stood alone in his classroom. In all his years of teaching, no species had ever thanked him for assigning them to a death world. He was starting to wonder if the humans really understood what they were getting into. He made a note to watch their progress carefully. Something told him this test was going to be very different from usual. The transport ship dropped the students across Nightmare Crucible at dawn. The planet looked angry from space, with swirling storms and strange colored patches that meant danger. As the drop pods hit the surface, the real challenge began: Nightmare. Crucible was everything Professor Kethver had promised and worse. The sky changed colors every few hours. In the north, volcanoes shot lava into the air while snow fell around them. To the east, acid rain fell on a desert where the sand was hot enough to melt metal. Strange gravity fields made walking impossible. In some areas, while others had air so thin that most species would pass out in minutes, within the first 6 hours, emergency beacons started going off across the planet. The Lumen students could not handle the electromagnetic storms that made their bodies flicker and fade. The nautiloids found that their water-based biology was useless in the dry air that sucked moisture from everything it touched, even the tough. Saurians were struggling with temperatures that changed from freezing to boiling in the space of a few hundred meters. The three humans had landed in different areas but managed to find each other by the end of the first day. They met at a place where a volcanic field touched a frozen lake. The ground here was warm but not deadly, and the air was thick enough to breathe without. The suits working too hard. Marcus had arrived first, and was already setting up a shelter using rocks from the volcanic area and ice from the lake. The rocks held heat from the lava fields, while the ice provided cooling and water when it melted slowly. This place is weird, he said when Beth arrived. But not too bad once you figure out the patterns. Beth had spent her day mapping the local area. She found that the dangerous zones had warning signs if you knew what to look for. The air shimmered differently over acid pools. The ground had a certain color before it became too hot to walk on. The gravity fields made a humming sound that you could hear if you listened carefully. It is like a puzzle, she said, showing Marcus her rough map. All the dangerous stuff has tells. You just have to pay attention. Tom arrived last, carrying something that might have been a local animal. It looked like a cross between a lizard and a bird with silver scales and small wings. Dinner, he announced. Found a whole family of these near the sulfur springs. They taste like chicken if chicken had been marinated in minerals for a week. Marcus and Beth stared at him. You already ate the local wildlife? Beth asked. Just a small piece first, Tom said. Basic survival. Try a tiny bit, wait an hour, try a bigger bit, wait another hour. If you are not dead, it is probably food. And if it had killed you? Marcus asked. Tom shrugged. Then you two would know not to eat them. By the second day, they had turned their meeting spot into something that looked almost comfortable. Marcus had built a shelter that used the planet's natural temperature differences to stay cool in the day and warm at night. Beth had created a water collection system that caught moisture from the air and filtered it through local crystals that turned out to be natural purifiers. Tom had become their food expert. He found plants that were safe to eat and discovered that some of the local animals were not only safe, but actually quite tasty. He also learned which creatures to avoid completely, usually by watching what the local predators would not hunt. The big red things with too many teeth, he explained to his friends. Even the other big red things with too many teeth will not mess with them. That is a bad sign. Meanwhile, other students across the planet were barely surviving. The Chitauri had formed a group and were using their technology to create safe zones, but their equipment was failing in the harsh conditions. The Saurians were toughing it out through pure willpower, but even they were losing students to the random dangers. A group of lumens had found a cave system that protected them from the electromagnetic storms, but they were trapped there because going outside meant their energy bodies would scatter. They had sent distress signals but were told that rescue would not come until the test period ended. Professor Kethver was watching all of this from the orbital station. His instruments showed him where each student was and how they were doing. The casualty reports were coming in faster than usual. This group of students was having a particularly hard time with Nightmare Crucible. Then his assistant pointed to the readings from the human zone. Professor, look at this. The 3 humans were not just surviving, they were thriving. Their shelter showed as a stable temperature zone on the thermal scanners. Their movement patterns suggested they were exploring and mapping the area systematically. Most surprisingly, the local wildlife was actually gathering near their camp. They appeared to have made friends with some of the local creatures. His assistant said on the main screen they could see Tom sharing food with what the database called crystal fang stalkers. These were pack predators known for their acid saliva and aggressive hunting behavior. They were supposed to attack anything that moved. Instead, 3 of them were sitting around Tom like oversized dogs while he cooked something over a small fire. Maybe they are drugging the animals, Professor Kethver suggested. No, sir. Chemical analysis shows no foreign substances. The humans appear to be sharing their food and the animals are grateful. Marcus appeared on another camera, walking calmly through a gravity field that had trapped 2 Saurian students the day before. He seemed to have figured out the pattern of the gravity changes and was moving in rhythm with them. He even appeared to be enjoying the challenge, jumping higher when the gravity was low and doing strength exercises when it was high. Beth was visible on a third camera, sitting by an acid pool with her feet dangling in the water. The acid that could eat through metal in minutes was apparently harmless to human skin, or she had found a way to neutralize it. How are they doing this? Professor Kethver asked. His assistant checked the records. They appear to be treating this as a learning experience rather than a survival challenge. They are not fighting the environment. They are adapting to it. But this is a Class 12 death world. Yes, sir. But according to their files, they come from a Class 11 death world. This might actually be easier for them. Professor Kethver looked at Earth's classification again. He had always thought the Class 11 rating was a mistake. Humans seemed so fragile, always wearing protective gear and avoiding danger. But maybe the rating was correct and humans were just naturally careful, not naturally weak, on the screen. Marcus was now jogging through a field of volcanic vents while carrying a large pack of supplies. Beth was building what looked like a water wheel using materials she had found around the camp. Tom was teaching a group of local animals to fetch sticks. Sir, his assistant said quietly. I think we might need to reclassify this planet. Professor Kethver stood in the observation deck of the orbital station, watching the screens that showed student locations across Nightmare Crucible. His crystal form reflected the glow from dozens of monitors, each one telling a story of struggle and survival on the deadly planet below. Status report, he commanded his assistant. A tentacled being named Rothki, whose species was known for careful record-keeping, Rothki, consulted his datapad with 3 tentacles while 2 others operated. The tracking systems: 31 students have activated emergency beacons and been evacuated. 8 more are showing critical stress indicators but have not yet called for rescue. The electromagnetic storm in Sector 7 has cut communications with 6 students. And the gravity anomaly in Sector 12 just pulled 3 more into emergency extraction. Professor Kethver processed this information with growing concern. This was shaping up to be one of the worst survival exercises in Academy history. Usually, at least 60% of students manage to complete the full 72 hours, even if they barely survive the experience. What about the remaining students? The Saurian group in Sector 4 is holding together, but losing members each day. The Chitauri collective in Sector 9 has managed to create a functional shelter, but their food supplies are running low. The Lumen survivors are trapped in the cave system and showing signs of energy depletion. And the humans? Rothki's tentacles writhed in what his species used to express confusion. Professor, the human readings are ... unusual. Define unusual. They appear to be improving their situation. Current scans show they have established a permanent shelter, created sustainable food and water sources, and somehow developed a symbiotic relationship with the local ecosystem. Professor Kethver moved to the main display screen. The human camp showed up as a bright spot on the thermal imaging, with organized structures and clear pathways. Around the camp, heat signatures showed various local creatures moving in patterns that suggested cooperation rather than predation. Show me the live feed, he ordered. The screen switched to real-time video from the surveillance satellites. The human camp looked like a small settlement. Marcus had built additional shelters using volcanic rock and ice in a design that created natural air conditioning. Beth had expanded her water system into something that looked like it belonged in an engineering textbook. Tom had created what could only be described as a ranch with various local animals living peacefully around the main camp. They are not just surviving, Professor Kethver observed. They are colonizing. As they watched, Marcus emerged from one of the shelters carrying what appeared to be a fishing rod made from local materials. He walked to a nearby acid pool and began fishing. Within minutes, he had caught something large and silvery. The acid pools are highly corrosive, Rothki noted. No known species can survive contact with that water, yet he is fishing in it. Yes, sir. And according to our chemical analysis, the fish he is catching are not only edible but highly nutritious. Beth appeared on screen, working on what looked like a forge made from volcanic vents. She was shaping metal tools from local ore deposits. The forge used the planet's natural heat sources and required no external power. She has discovered metallurgy, Professor Kethver said with disbelief. It appears she is making improvements to their equipment using local materials. The tools she has created are actually superior to the standard issue gear we provided. Tom was visible in another part of the camp, leading a group of crystal-fanged stalkers in what looked like a training exercise. The predators were following his commands and performing tasks like carrying supplies and patrolling the perimeter. He has domesticated Class A predators, Professor Kethver said weakly. The animals appear to have accepted him as pack leader. They are now protecting the human camp from other threats. Professor Kethver requested a wider view of the surrounding area. The cameras showed that the human camp had become the center of a safe zone that extended for kilometers in all directions. Dangerous predators avoided the area entirely. The environmental hazards seemed less severe near the camp. Even the weather appeared calmer in their immediate vicinity. How is this possible? Rothki checked his instruments again. Analysis suggests the humans have identified and eliminated the primary stressors in their local ecosystem. By removing certain predators and neutralizing specific environmental threats, they have created a stable microenvironment. In less than 48 hours? Yes, sir? The professor watched Marcus jog past a gravity anomaly field, timing his steps to match the fluctuations. He moved through the dangerous area like he was dancing, using the changing gravity to enhance his movement rather than fighting against it. He is using the gravity wells for exercise, Professor Kethver observed. The humans appear to view the environmental challenges as opportunities rather than threats. Where other species see deadly obstacles, they see resources and training equipment. A proximity alarm sounded. One of the Chitauri students was approaching the human camp, moving slowly and showing signs of severe stress. Professor Kethver switched to that camera feed. The Chitauri student, whose name was Clixit, had been traveling for hours through dangerous terrain. Her equipment was failing and her food supplies were exhausted. She stumbled toward the human camp. Probably drawn by the visible signs of successful habitation, Tom noticed her approach first. He set down the tools he was working with and walked out to meet her. The Crystal Fang stalkers followed but stayed back when Tom gestured for them to wait. Incoming survivor, Tom called to his companions. Marcus and Beth emerged from their shelters. They approached the Chitauri student carefully, recognizing the signs of exhaustion and dehydration. "Easy there," Marcus said gently. "You look like you need help." Clixit collapsed before she could respond. The three humans immediately went into action. Beth brought water and food while Marcus checked for injuries. Tom kept the local animals calm and at a distance. Within minutes, they had the Chitauri student stable and recovering. They shared their food and water freely, gave her a place to rest, and began treating her equipment failures with their improvised tools. "They are providing aid," Professor Kethver noted. "Yes, sir. This is the third student they have assisted. The previous two chose to remain in the human camp rather than continue on their own." "Where are those students now?" Rothke adjusted the camera view. Two other alien students were visible working around the camp. A Saurian was helping Marcus with construction while a Lumen was assisting Beth with her water purification system. "It have formed a multi-species cooperative," Professor Kethver said. "The other students appear to be learning human survival techniques. Their stress indicators have dropped to normal levels since joining the group." Professor Kethver realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The humans had not just survived a Class 12 death world. They had turned it into a thriving community center. Other species were seeking them out for help and protection. "Sir," Rothke said quietly, "I believe we may need to revise our understanding of human capabilities." On the screen, Tom was teaching Clixit how to identify safe food sources while Marcus showed the Saurian student his construction techniques. Beth was explaining water purification to the Lumen, who was taking careful notes. The human camp had become a school, a rescue center, and a demonstration of how to not just survive but thrive in impossible conditions. Professor Kethver was beginning to understand why Earth was classified as a Class 11 death world, and why the humans who came from it were capable of things that defied galactic understanding. By the morning of the second day, the human campsite had transformed into something that resembled a small but thriving settlement. What had started as a basic survival shelter was now a complex of interconnected structures that seemed to work in harmony with the hostile environment around them. Beth had spent the early hours perfecting her water purification system. She discovered that the local crystal formations could filter out toxins when arranged in specific patterns. By combining these crystals with volcanic heat and ice from the frozen zones, she created a system that produced clean, safe drinking water faster than the standard academy equipment. "The crystals actually improve the water," she explained to Clixit, who was watching with fascination. "They add minerals that help with the low oxygen levels at this altitude." The Chitauri student clicked her mandibles in amazement. Her own species purification technology was far more advanced but required complex machinery and energy sources. Beth's system used only materials found lying on the ground and the planet's natural processes. Tom had expanded his food production beyond simple hunting and gathering. He discovered that several local plants grew rapidly when their roots were exposed to the mineral-rich water from the acid pools. By creating small irrigation channels, he established garden plots that produced fresh vegetables in soil that should have been completely barren. The trick is not fighting the acid, he explained to the Saurian student who was helping him tend the plants. You use it like fertilizer? Most things that grow here actually need the minerals that would kill plants from other worlds. His domesticated crystal fang stalkers had proven remarkably intelligent. They learned to help with farming by digging irrigation channels with their claws and hunting specific pests that threatened the crops. In return, Tom shared the harvest with them and provided shelter in the cave system he had discovered behind the volcanic vents. Marcus had become fascinated with the gravity anomaly zones scattered across the planet. Instead of avoiding them, like every other species did, he spent hours studying their patterns and learning to move through them safely. It is like surfing, he explained to Beth while demonstrating how to walk through a field where gravity shifted every few seconds. You feel the change coming and adjust your balance. After a while, it becomes natural. He had mapped several gravity zones and discovered they followed predictable cycles. By timing his movements correctly, he could travel through areas that were impassable to other species. This gave the human group access to resource deposits and safe zones that no one else could reach. The other students who had joined the human camp were learning quickly. The Saurian, whose name was Vorthek, had always prided himself on being tough and adaptable. But watching the humans work made him realize there was a difference between enduring hardship and thriving despite it. Your people do not just survive, he said to Marcus. You improve everything around you. Well, Marcus replied while adjusting a solar collector made from polished volcanic glass, if you are going to be somewhere, might as well make it nice. The Lumen student, Brightglow, was particularly amazed by the human approach to problem solving. Her species relied on advanced technology and careful planning. The humans seemed to make things up as they went along, but somehow their improvised solutions worked better than engineered equipment. How did you know the crystals would purify water? She asked Beth. I did not, Beth admitted. I just tried. When it worked, I tried different arrangements to see what worked better. But what if it had been dangerous? Then we would have tried something else. This casual attitude toward experimentation horrified most alien species who preferred to test everything exhaustively before implementation. But it allowed the humans to rapidly adapt to changing conditions and discover solutions that more careful species would never find. By the end of the second day, the human camp had attracted visitors from across the planet. Students who were still surviving on their own began making pilgrimages to the settlement, drawn by reports of abundant food, clean water, and safety from the planet's many dangers. Professor Kethver watched this development with growing amazement. His instruments showed that the human zone had stabilized most of the local environmental hazards. The temperature fluctuations were less extreme, the electromagnetic storms were weaker. Even the acid rain seemed to be neutralized before it reached the ground. They are terraforming, he said to Rothke. In real time. It appears their activities have created a feedback loop with the local ecosystem, his assistant confirmed. Their presence is actually improving the planetary conditions in their immediate area. The humans had also established trade relationships with the surviving student groups. Marcus traveled to other camps regularly, offering food, water, and technical assistance in exchange for information about distant resource deposits and environmental conditions. We found a geothermal vent system about 10 kilometers south, he reported back from one such expedition. Enough energy to power equipment for the whole planet. Also, there is a group of nautiloids trapped in a cave system over there. They need water, but the local sources are too acidic for them. Road trip? Tom suggested. Road trip. Beth agreed. They spent the next day establishing a supply route to the trapped nautiloids, using Marcus's gravity field maps to find safe passage through terrain that had been considered impassable. They brought water purification crystals and enough food to keep the aquatic students healthy until rescue arrived. In return, the nautiloids shared their knowledge of the underground cave systems. which revealed a vast network of tunnels that connected most of the continent. The humans immediately began exploring these tunnels, turning them into a rapid transit system that allowed them to reach any part of the testing zone within hours. By the third day, what had started as a survival exercise had become a demonstration of human adaptability and engineering skill. The human camp was now a hub of activity that supported not just the 3 original humans, but more than a dozen students from various species. They had created infrastructure, established agriculture, domesticated wildlife, and built transportation networks. They had turned one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds into a place where alien students felt safer than they did in their own dormitories. Professor Kethver realized he was witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about planetary habitability and species survival capabilities. The humans had not just adapted to Nightmare Crucible, they had made it adapt to them. "Sir," Rothke said as he monitored the latest readings, "I think we may need to reclassify this planet." "To what?" "Based on current conditions in the human zone, I would say Class 7, maybe Class 6 if the improvements continue." Professor Kethver stared at the screens showing the thriving human settlement. In less than 3 days, they had reduced a Class 12 death world to the equivalent of a mildly challenging camping trip. He was beginning to understand why Earth had produced a species capable of such achievements. If this was what humans could do when they were trying to survive, he wondered what they might accomplish when they were actually trying to build something. The final day of the survival exercise dawned with rescue shuttles beginning their approach to Nightmare Crucible. Professor Kethver prepared for what he expected to be a typical extraction operation, collecting exhausted and traumatized students from across the planet's surface. Instead, he found himself facing the most unusual situation in his 3 centuries of teaching. The extraction shuttles reported back with confusion and amazement. The human zone was not just thriving but had become a functioning society. When the rescue teams arrived at the coordinates, they found not desperate survivors but a welcoming committee. Tom met the first shuttle with a basket of fresh food and bottles of purified water. "Welcome to Camp Nightmare," he said cheerfully. "You guys hungry? We have been experimenting with local cuisine." The rescue team leader, a veteran Saurian Marine named Captain Neck, stared at the settlement spread out below his shuttle, where he expected to find 3 humans barely clinging to life. He saw organized structures, cultivated gardens, and various alien students working together on what appeared to be construction projects. "Are you the human students?" Captain Neck asked. "That is us," Beth replied, emerging from what looked like a workshop carrying a set of tools she had crafted from local materials. "Did you bring the academic evaluation forms? We have some suggestions for improving this course." Marcus jogged up from the direction of the gravity fields, where he had been conducting what appeared to be scientific experiments. "Perfect timing," he said. "We just finished mapping the northern continent. Found some really interesting geological formations that would be great for future classes." Captain Neck activated his communicator. "Command, this is Extraction Team Alpha. The humans appear to be... well, they appear to be fine. More than fine, actually." Professor Kethver's voice crackled through the comm system. "What is their condition?" "Sir, they seem to have built a resort." On the orbital station, Professor Kethver was reviewing the final statistics from the exercise. Of the original 47 students, 19 had been evacuated early due to medical emergencies or equipment failures. 12 had barely survived to the end of the 72-hour period and required immediate medical attention upon extraction. 16 students had completed the challenge with passing grades. This was actually a higher success rate than usual, which Professor Kethver attributed entirely to human intervention. Every student who had made contact with the human group had not only survived, but thrived. There were the 3 humans themselves. They had not simply survived a Class 12 death world. They had improved it. They had created sustainable infrastructure, established diplomatic relations with local wildlife, and built a functioning multi-species community. They had also collected enough scientific data to revolutionize galactic understanding of extreme environment adaptation. Beth's notes on local geology and resource utilization filled several dozen data pads. Tom's observations on planetary biology and ecosystem management contained discoveries that would keep xenobiologists busy for years. Marcus's gravitational field studies provided insights that would advance physics research across multiple disciplines. "Professor," Beth said as they prepared to board the shuttle, "this was actually really educational. We learned a lot about improvised engineering and ecological adaptation." "The gravity fields were particularly interesting," Marcus added. "We would love to do a follow-up study with proper equipment." Tom nodded enthusiastically. "And the biological diversity here is amazing. Some of these species have incredible survival adaptations. We brought samples if anyone wants to study them." Professor Kethver felt his crystal structure developing stress fractures. "You want to return to this planet?" "Well, maybe not for vacation," Beth said, "but definitely for research. This place has incredible potential." "Potential for what?" "Terraforming," Marcus said. "Give us a few months and we could make this place really livable. Maybe set up a permanent research station." "Or a survival school," Tom suggested. "Other species could learn a lot from the local ecosystem. Though we would need to start with easier environments and work up to this level." Captain Neck was listening to this conversation with the expression of someone watching a cosmic disaster in slow motion. "Are you three saying you enjoyed this experience?" "Oh, absolutely," Beth replied. "It was challenging but not too difficult. Kind of like advanced camping." "This is a Class 12 death world," Captain Neck said weakly. "Yeah, we heard that," Marcus said. "But honestly, it is not that bad once you understand how things work. The environment just requires a different approach than most species are used to." As they flew back to the orbital station, Professor Kethver tried to process what had happened. The humans had completed an exercise designed to test the absolute limits of survival capability. They had not just passed the test but had redefined what success looked like. More importantly, they seemed genuinely confused by the idea that this had been difficult. They treated a Class 12 death world like other species might treat a challenging hiking trail when they arrived at the station. Professor Kethver called an immediate faculty meeting. The other instructors gathered to hear his report on the exercise, expecting the usual statistics about survival rates and student performance. Instead, they found themselves listening to an account that challenged basic assumptions about planetary classification and species capability ratings. "I recommend," Professor Kethver concluded, "that we establish a new classification system for human students. Standard death world parameters appear to be insufficient for proper evaluation of their capabilities. What are you suggesting?" asked Professor Vex, who taught advanced combat techniques. "I suggest we develop Class 15 environments for human assessment. And I recommend that we prohibit other species from attempting human standard challenges without extensive genetic modification and psychological preparation." The faculty meeting dissolved into chaos as professors argued about the implications. Some insisted that the humans must have cheated somehow. Others wondered if Earth's danger rating had been underestimated. A few suggested that humans might represent an entirely new category of species classification. Meanwhile, the three humans were in the student lounge, filling out course evaluation forms. "Overall rating?" Marcus asked. "I would say 7 out of 10, Beth replied. "Good variety of challenges, but could use more weather events." "Agreed," Tom said. "Maybe some seasonal changes next time. And it would be nice to have a few more predator species to work with." They submitted their evaluations and began planning their next semester courses. Advanced underwater survival looked interesting. So did extreme low-gravity operations and toxic atmosphere navigation. Professor Kethver found their evaluations the next day. Along with their numerical ratings, they had provided detailed suggestions for improving the course. They recommended adding more diverse environmental challenges, providing opportunities for infrastructure development, and including lessons on multi-species cooperation. At the bottom of the forms, they had written a note thanking him for choosing such an interesting planet and asking If they could get extra credit for establishing a permanent research outpost there, Professor Cuthbert quietly began planning his retirement. Some discoveries were too large for one professor to handle, and he was becoming convinced that humanity represented a fundamental shift in the galactic understanding of what was possible. The course advanced. Extreme environment survival was restructured. The following semester, it now included a warning that human students would be evaluated using different criteria, and that other species should not attempt to emulate human survival techniques without proper medical supervision. Nightmare Crucible was reclassified as a human-suitable recreational environment, and the Galactic Academy began receiving inquiries from Earth universities about establishing an exchange program for students interested in extreme environment studies. The three humans remained largely unaware of the changes they had caused. They simply continued signing up for challenging courses, treating deadly environments like interesting puzzles to solve, and accidentally revolutionizing galactic civilization's understanding of what survival actually meant.